"You never helped this family," my mother said at dinner, until the bank clerk printed the transfers showing my brother's rent, her car payment, and every bill they swore I imagined. My mother said I never helped this family 2 weeks after I paid my brother's rent, and 3 days after I covered her car payment. That is the part I keep coming back to. Because if she had said it during a random argument in private, maybe I would have swallowed it the way I had swallowed a lot of things. But she said it at dinner, in front of my aunt, my cousin, and my brother, while my brother sat across from me with his eyes on his plate like the food had suddenly become the most interesting thing in the world. It started with a car payment. It usually did. My mother had this way of bringing up money without technically asking at first. She would sigh, mention a due date, say she did not know why everything hit at the same time, then look in my direction like the problem had already been handed to me. That night, she said her car payment was coming up again, and that she was short because groceries had been expensive. I did not say yes right away. I just took a sip of water and said, "I can't keep doing this without talking about it." The table changed after that. It was not loud at first. It was worse than loud. It was that tight, polite, quiet families get when everyone knows something ugly is about to be said, but nobody wants to be the person who stops it. My mother put her fork down and looked at me like I had insulted her instead of answered a question. Then she said, "You act like we're always asking you for something. You never helped this family unless it made you look good." I remember staring at her because my brain could not decide which part to process first. The lie, the confidence, or the fact that my brother did not even flinch. He knew. He knew because the rent transfer had gone directly from my account to his landlord's payment portal. I had texted him after I sent it, and he had replied with a thumbs up, and "I'll get you back soon." That was 14 days before this dinner. He was sitting right there, chewing slowly, pretending my mother had not just erased money that kept a roof over his head. My aunt jumped in before I could answer. She did it in that soft voice people use when they want their judgment to sound like wisdom. She said, "Honey, your mother has done everything for you. At some point, you can't keep acting like helping family is a burden." My cousin looked uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to say anything. My mother leaned back in her chair, like my aunt had confirmed the truth, and the trial was basically over. I almost opened my banking app right there. My phone was on the table next to my napkin. I remember my thumb touching the side button, and I remember stopping myself, because some old part of me still thought, "Do not embarrass your mother. Do not make this a scene. Do not be the daughter who brings receipts to dinner." That was the ridiculous part. I was the one being called selfish in public, and I was still trying to protect everyone else from the proof. So instead of opening the app, I asked, "Are you sure you want to talk about what I've paid for?" My mother gave this small laugh, like I had just confirmed something sad about myself. "Paid for what?" she said. "A few little things here and there. You always do this. You make normal family help sound like some huge sacrifice." I looked at my brother then. I wanted him to say something simple. He did not have to make a speech. He did not have to defend my entire life. All he had to say was, "She did pay my rent," or even, "Mom, that's not fair." But he kept looking down. That silence hurt more than my mother's sentence, because my mother could convince herself of almost anything when she needed to. My brother knew exactly what she was doing, and he chose the side that kept him comfortable. I said, "You know I paid his rent this month." My brother finally looked up, but only for a second. My mother turned to him, then back to me, and said, "Don't drag your brother into this. He's trying. You have no idea what pressure feels like for him." That was when I understood the rules at the table. My brother's pressure was real. My mother's pressure was real. My aunt's disappointment was real. Mine was apparently just attitude. If I helped, it was expected. If I hesitated, it was selfish. If I remembered, I was keeping score. If they forgot, it was family. I sat there with my phone under my hand, feeling the screen go warm against my palm. And I asked one more time, quieter than I expected, "Do you really want me to show you the transfers?" My mother did not hesitate. That is the part that still amazes me. She did not pause, did not look at my brother, did not even seem worried. She just smiled like she had already won and said, "Go ahead, show us. You won't find what you think you'll find." The thing about being the responsible one in a family is that nobody usually says it like an insult at first. They say it like a compliment. They say you are mature, reliable, steady, the one they do not have to worry about. When I got my first stable job after college, my mother told everyone I had always been independent. At the time, I thought she was proud of me. It took me years to understand that, in my family, independent meant available. It meant I did not need help, so I could be used to help everyone else. My brother is 3 years younger than me, and according to my mother, he has been going through a hard time for most of his adult life. When he dropped community college classes, he was overwhelmed. When he quit a warehouse job after 2 months, the manager had been unfair. When he lost hours at a restaurant, the economy was impossible. When he forgot to budget for rent, he was still learning. There was always a reason, and the reason was always shaped in a way that made any consequence sound cruel. If I questioned it, I was reminded that he was my brother. If I hesitated, I was reminded that I was doing better than him. My mother never asked for large things directly at first. That was not her style. She would circle the problem until I stepped into it myself. She would call and say the car payment was due on Friday, and she was short because her paycheck had been smaller than expected. Then there would be a pause. If I did not fill the pause fast enough, she would say something like, "Don't worry, I'll figure it out. I always do." That sentence was a hook. It made me feel like I was standing there watching my mother drown while pretending the water had nothing to do with me. The first time I paid her car payment, I told myself it was practical. Late fees would make everything worse. She needed the car for work. It was not like I was handing her shopping money. I logged into the payment portal with the information she sent me, paid the amount, and texted her a screenshot. She replied, "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll pay you back next month." I believed that, or at least I wanted to. It felt better to believe it was a loan than to admit I had just become a backup account. Then my brother's rent happened. His hours had been cut, or at least that was the version I got. My mother called me in a rush, already upset, saying he was embarrassed and did not want to ask me himself. She said he was short, his landlord was being difficult, and if he got an eviction notice, it could ruin his rental history. I remember sitting in my car outside work, still wearing my badge, listening to her talk faster and faster until the problem had only one solution: me. I asked why he had not called me himself. My mother said, "Because he knows how you get when money comes up." That one sentence did a lot of work. It made me defensive before I had even said no. It made me feel cold for asking basic questions. It turned my hesitation into a character flaw. So I texted my brother, and he sent me the payment link with a message that said, "I swear I'll get you back when my check hits." I paid it from my bank account, put rent in the memo line, and hated myself a little for doing that. At the time, labeling it felt petty. Like some ugly part of me was preparing for a trial nobody had announced yet. But I kept doing it. Not every month. That would almost have been easier to explain. It was irregular enough for them to call it occasional, but frequent enough that my budget started bending around theirs. A utility bill here. Another car payment there. A grocery transfer before a holiday because my mother wanted one normal dinner without stress. Insurance 1 month because she had forgotten it was on autopay. My brother's half of rent when he was between checks. Every payment came with a story. Every story came with urgency. Every urgency came with the same quiet expectation that I would solve it and then not bring it up later. I was not rich. That is something I need people to understand. I had a decent job, but decent does not mean endless. I rented a small apartment, drove an older car, and watched my own savings crawl forward and backward, depending on what crisis landed in my messages. There were months when I skipped things I needed because someone else's need had been made louder. I delayed a dental appointment because my mother's car needed to stay current. I pushed off replacing my tires because my brother's rent was due. I told myself those were adult sacrifices, but looking back, a lot of them were just me quietly disappearing from my own life. And the worst part was that the gratitude faded faster than the payments cleared. The first few times, my mother thanked me. My brother promised to pay me back. Then the language shifted. It stopped being thank you and became, "I knew you'd understand." Then it became, "Can you send it today?" Then it became silence, unless I said I could not do it. In which case, suddenly everyone had plenty to say about family. That was how my paycheck became family property, without anyone admitting they had taken it. No one demanded my debit card. No one forced me to transfer money. That is the part that makes it complicated, and it is also the part people in my family still use against me. I said yes. I did send the payments. I did answer the calls. I did let my mother make me feel like the only thing worse than being used was refusing to be useful. For a long time, I thought if I helped quietly enough, they would eventually see it. I thought one day my mother would say, in front of someone else, "She has done a lot for us." I thought my brother would get back on his feet and remember who kept him from falling harder. I did not need a parade. I just wanted the truth to exist somewhere outside my own head. Instead, the truth got smaller every time they retold it. The first car payment became a little help. The utility bill became, she offered. The grocery money became, not a big deal. And the first rent transfer my brother promised to repay was called a loan. The second one was just expected. The first transfer memo I ever typed for my mother was car payment, and I remember staring at those 2 words longer than I needed to. The payment itself was simple. She sent me the amount, the account information, and the due date. What made me pause was the memo line. Leaving it blank felt easier. Writing car payment felt cold, like I was building a case against my own mother before I even understood there was a case to build. I typed it anyway. Car payment. Then I hit send. My mother called 15 minutes later, sounding so relieved that I felt guilty for being annoyed. She said I had saved her from a late fee, that she only needed to get through that month, and that she hated asking me. I told her it was okay. It was not okay. I had just moved money away from my own car repair fund, but I told myself her car was more urgent because she needed it for work. That was how I justified the first payment. The second payment came with less embarrassment and more expectation. She said the due date had hit at the wrong time, and if she missed it, next month would be worse. When I asked if she had called the lender, she sighed and said, "I thought you understood how tight things are right now." That sentence always worked on me because it made the problem sound like a test of loyalty. I paid again. This time I wrote "Mom Car" in the memo because car payment looked too official, and even in my own bank account I was trying not to sound angry. My brother's rent was worse because rent came with fear attached to it. My mother knew I could ignore a late fee more easily than I could ignore the word eviction, even if nobody had actually filed anything. She called me from her kitchen one afternoon and said my brother was short because his hours had been cut. She said he was too embarrassed to ask me himself. I asked why he had not called me directly, and she said, "Because he knows how you get when money comes up." That sentence did a lot of work. It made me defensive before I even said no. It turned a normal question into proof that I was judgmental. So I texted my brother, and he sent me the payment link with, "I swear I'll get you back when my check hits." I paid the landlord portal directly because I did not want to send him the money and hope it went where it was supposed to go. In the memo line, I wrote his name and rent. That note would matter later. At the time, it just made me feel petty. After that, the emergencies learned how to rotate. If it was not my mother's car, it was my brother's rent. If it was not rent, it was the electric bill. One summer, my mother said the power company had sent a shut-off warning. I asked when the first notice had come, and she snapped, "I didn't call you to be judged." I paid the past due amount during my lunch break while eating crackers at my desk because I had forgotten to pack real food. Then there was insurance. Then groceries before a holiday because my mother wanted one normal dinner without stress. Then my brother's phone bill because he needed it for job calls. Gas money because he had an interview. Small transfers that looked harmless by themselves. 50 here, 80 there, 120 there. The trick was that no single payment looked big enough to call exploitation. One car payment could be kindness. One rent rescue could be compassion. One grocery transfer could be normal family help. But it was never one thing. It was a system built out of just this once. Every time I tried to slow it down, someone made the problem my attitude. If I asked my brother when he could repay me, he said, "I said I would. Why are you acting like I won't?" If I asked my mother why the same bills kept turning into emergencies, she said, "You think you're better than me because you budget?" If I said I needed to save, she reminded me that she had raised me without anyone helping her. That last part was not completely false, which made it harder to fight. She had worked hard, she had been tired, but somehow her sacrifices became a bill I could never finish paying. I started making small rules for myself. I would not send cash if I could avoid it. I would pay the company directly. I would put notes in the transfer memo. I would save the texts where they asked. I told myself this was just responsible, the same way people keep receipts for taxes or warranties. But underneath that excuse was a fear I did not want to admit. I was afraid that one day they would say it never happened. My own life got smaller in ways nobody saw. I skipped dinners with friends unless I knew the place was cheap. I kept work shoes longer than I should have. I delayed dental work after my mother called about insurance. I ignored the noise my car made because I was afraid to learn what it would cost. Nobody in my family knew those details because I did not tell them. That was my part in it. I acted like the money came from some painless extra pile I had lying around. Partly because I did not want them to feel bad, and partly because I was ashamed to admit I was being drained. There is a strange humiliation in realizing you are being used when you have technically been saying yes. It makes you feel like you are not allowed to be angry, only tired. The second time I paid my brother's rent, he did not even pretend as hard. He called and said he was short again. I asked what happened to paying me back from the first time. He said, "I was going to, but other stuff came up." He did not explain the other stuff. He just let the silence stretch, the way my mother did. Like silence was a cup he expected me to fill with money. I said, "This can't keep happening." He said, "I know. I'm not asking because I want to." That sentence worked because it let both of us pretend he had no choice. I paid again. I typed "rent again" in the note, then deleted again because it looked too bitter. I changed it to just "rent." Even in a private bank memo, I was trying not to sound angry. The worst part was how quickly they forgot the help and how permanently they remembered the hesitation. My mother could forget 3 car payments, but remember the one time I asked why the bill was late again. My brother could forget rent money, but remember that I sounded judgmental when I asked when he would pay me back. My aunt could hear one version of me being cold and never ask what happened before I got that way. By the time my mother said I never helped this family at that dinner table, I had years of payments behind me. Car payments, rent, electric, insurance, groceries, phone bills, gas money, little rescues that became invisible as soon as the crisis passed. They remembered every time I hesitated. They forgot every time I paid. I left dinner before dessert. That sounds dramatic, but it was not. I did not storm out. I did not throw a napkin down or tell everyone exactly what I thought of them. I stood up, said I had an early morning, and put my chair back under the table because apparently my nervous system still cared about manners. My mother did not stop me. She just made this small, disappointed sound, the kind she used when she wanted other people to hear that she was being hurt by me. My brother did not walk me out. I want to say that did not matter, but it did. He had let the lie sit at the table, warm and comfortable, because correcting it would have cost him something. By the time I reached my car, I had replayed the dinner 3 different ways in my head. In one version, I opened my banking app and read every payment out loud. In another, I asked my brother directly if he enjoyed watching me be called selfish after I paid his rent. In the real version, I sat in the driver's seat with my hands on the wheel and did nothing for almost 5 minutes. The first message came before I even got home. It was from my aunt. "Your mother is very upset. I know money is stressful, but you embarrassed her tonight." I stared at that sentence at a red light and felt something in me go cold. Not because my aunt was the worst person in the story. She was not. That was part of why it worked. She sounded reasonable. She sounded like she was trying to smooth things over. But the smoothing always happened in one direction. Nobody was texting my mother to say she had embarrassed me. Nobody was texting my brother to ask why he stayed silent. The first repair crew had been sent to the person who had finally objected. By the time I got back to my apartment, the family group chat had already started doing that thing where people talk around you while technically talking to you. My aunt wrote that families should be able to have hard conversations without people walking out. My cousin sent a short "hope everyone's okay" message, which was probably meant to be neutral but landed like fog. Then my mother wrote, "I'm tired of being made to feel like a burden by my own child." I read that message 3 times. My own child. Not my daughter. Not me by name. My own child. Like she was making a closing argument to an invisible jury. That was how she talked when she wanted the room on her side. I could feel the old reflex in my fingers. Apologize. Say I did not mean it that way. Say I was stressed. Offer to help with the car payment anyway, but ask if we could talk about the rest later. That was the script I had followed for years. So much of my life with my family had been me trying to correct the tone of my objection, instead of questioning why I was always the one being asked to shrink. Instead, I put the phone down and made myself wash my face. I changed out of the sweater I had worn to dinner. I folded it over the back of a chair, even though I wanted to throw it on the floor. Then I picked up the phone again, because ignoring the messages did not make them stop existing. My brother had texted me privately by then. "Why did you have to make it awkward?" That was all. Not "mom was wrong." Not "I should have said something." Not "thanks again for rent, by the way." Just that. Why did I have to make it awkward? I laughed once when I read it, but it was not because anything was funny. It was that short, ugly laugh people make when a sentence is too perfect in the worst possible way. I typed, "You knew she was lying." The typing bubbles appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally he wrote, "I didn't want to make it worse." I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at that message. Worse for who? That was what I wanted to ask. Worse for my mother, who would have had to admit I paid bills she told people I imagined. Worse for him, because everyone would know his rent had been covered by the sister he let them call selfish. Or worse for me, because apparently I was already the designated place where everyone's discomfort could be dumped. I wrote back, "You could have said one sentence." He replied, "You know how mom gets." And there it was. The family motto, basically. You know how mom gets. It meant do not push her. It meant absorb it. It meant let her say the thing. Because correcting her will cost everyone more than letting you take the hit. I had heard that sentence in different forms my whole adult life, but that night, it looked different on my screen. It did not look like an explanation anymore. It looked like a job assignment. The group chat kept going. My aunt wrote, "I don't think anyone is saying you've never done anything, but keeping score with your mother is not healthy." That was the first time I noticed how quickly the story shifted once I pushed back. At dinner, my mother had said I never helped. Now, in writing, the family version was already softening into, nobody said you never did anything, but they had. She had. In front of everyone. I typed and deleted 3 different responses. The angry one had too many details. The polite one sounded like I was begging to be understood. The short one said, "Do you know what I've paid?" I sent that one. Nobody answered for a minute. Then my mother wrote, "Here we go. Now you're going to make yourself the victim over a few little things you offered to do." A few little things. That phrase hit something in me harder than the original insult. Maybe because "you never helped" was so false that my mind could reject it. A few little things was more dangerous. It was how they made the truth small enough to step over. It was how rent became help, how a car payment became nothing, how electricity, insurance, groceries, phone bills, and late fees all dissolved into normal family support that only counted when they needed it and disappeared when I remembered it. I did not reply. I opened my banking app. At first, I only meant to check the recent rent payment. I wanted to see it with my own eyes, like maybe proof would calm me down. I searched my brother's first name, and the most recent transfer appeared. There it was, the date, the amount, the landlord company, the memo line with his name and rent. My stomach tightened, not because I was surprised, but because it looked so plain. A clean little line of text proving something that had just been treated like a fantasy. Then I scrolled. Another rent payment, then a smaller transfer with his name, then one to the same landlord company months before. Then one I had almost forgotten about, from a period when he said his paycheck was delayed. Each line brought back the room I had been in when I sent it. My car outside work, my kitchen counter, my bed at midnight, a grocery store parking lot. Tiny pieces of my life, attached to his emergencies. My mother texted again while I was looking. "You always twist things." I said, "You act like helping is a burden." That's different. It was not different, but it was familiar. My mother was already sanding down the sharp edges of what she said. If I let it go another day, she would sand it down further. A week later, the story would be that I had overreacted to a normal conversation. A month later, she would say she never brought up money at dinner at all. I switched the search from my brother's name to my mother's. More results came up. Car payment, insurance, electric, a transfer labeled groceries, another labeled car, another that just said "Mom, urgent," which made me close my eyes because I remembered typing it while half asleep, scared she would miss a deadline if I waited until morning. The group chat had gone quiet by then, but it did not feel like peace. It felt like everyone was waiting to see whether I would perform the version of myself they recognized. The one who apologized, the one who paid, the one who said, "Forget it, I don't want to fight." For the first time that night, I did not want to be that person. I opened a blank note on my phone and started copying dates. At first, it was just the recent ones. The rent payment from 2 weeks ago, the car payment from 3 days ago, the electric bill from earlier that year. Then I searched again, and the list kept growing. What scared me was not that I found proof. It was how easy it was to find. It had been there the whole time, sitting inside my account history, while my family built a version of me that could only survive if nobody looked. Then I searched my brother's name one more time, changing the date range further back. The results kept loading. I did not sleep much that night. I wish I could say I made a calm, organized decision to gather evidence, but that would make me sound more composed than I was. What actually happened was that I sat on my bed with my laptop open, my phone beside me, and a glass of water I kept forgetting to drink while I searched my own financial history like I was investigating a stranger. I started with the payments I remembered because they were recent and still raw. My brother's rent from 2 weeks earlier, my mother's car payment from 3 days earlier, the electric bill from earlier that year. I thought I was making a short list to prove a point. Then, the short list became a page. I searched my brother's name first. His name brought up transfers I remembered, and some I had pushed so far out of my mind that seeing them felt like someone tapping me on the shoulder. There was the landlord company. There were smaller transfers labeled gas and phone. There was one note that said rent short, and I remembered the exact call that went with it. He had told me he was only short a little, then sent an amount that was almost half his rent. I had been sitting in my car during lunch, angry enough to say no and scared enough to say yes. After that, I searched the landlord company name by itself. More payments came up. That was when I realized my memory had been protecting me by being incomplete. I had remembered the big incidents, the ones that left bruises. The bank remembered everything. The bank did not care about excuses. It just kept the dates. I switched to my mother's name next. Car payment, insurance, electric, groceries, mom urgent. Another car payment. I hated that one of the notes just said urgent because it was too accurate and not accurate enough. Everything was urgent. That was the entire structure. If I stopped to ask questions, I was cold. If I paid quickly, I was a good daughter for about 10 minutes, and then the payment disappeared into family fog. I opened a spreadsheet. It was not some revenge document. It was just me trying not to lose track. I made columns for date, amount, recipient, reason, and whether there was a text attached. Then I started scrolling through old messages, and the story became harder to dismiss. The texts matched the payments almost perfectly. My mother asking if I could help before Friday. My brother saying he would get me back next check. My mother sending a screenshot of a bill with the top cropped off, like the amount mattered, but the history did not. One text from my brother stopped me for a while. It said, "Please, I'm serious. I don't have anyone else." I remembered reading it at work and going to the restroom after sending the money because I did not want a coworker to see my face. That was not a few little things. The weirdest part was that the total did not make me feel powerful. It made me feel embarrassed. I know that is not fair. If someone else told me this story, I would probably tell them they were manipulated, not stupid. But sitting there alone, watching the numbers add up, I felt like I had been standing in the middle of my own life, holding a bucket under everyone else's leaks, and calling it love. Around midnight, my mother texted me privately, "You owe me an apology for tonight." I stared at that message with the spreadsheet open in front of me. The total was already higher than I expected, and I was not finished. I had rent payments, car payments, insurance, electric bills, and several transfers I still needed to match to conversations. My mother was asking for an apology while my screen was full of the money she said barely existed. I wrote back, "For what?" She replied almost immediately, "For making me look like I beg you for money, for making your brother uncomfortable, for acting like you're the only person who has ever helped anyone." That was when I understood that her anger was not really about the money. It was about the picture. In her version, she was the tired mother who had done everything alone. My brother was the struggling son who needed patience, and I was the daughter with a decent job who had become too proud to remember where she came from. My payments did not fit that story. So the payments had to become small, voluntary, exaggerated, or imaginary. I typed, "I have records." She wrote, "Of what? A few transfers you offered?" I looked at the spreadsheet. I looked at the old texts where she had sent due dates, amounts, and account information. I wanted to send screenshots right then. I wanted to flood the chat with proof until nobody could pretend not to see it. But I also knew my family. One screenshot would become out of context. 5 screenshots would become cherry-picked. A total I made myself would become dramatic. So I wrote bank transfers, direct payments, your car, his rent, utilities, insurance. There was a pause long enough that I thought she might finally understand the size of what she had stepped into. Then she replied, "You are being dramatic. Print it then. I want to see this fantasy you made up." Fantasy, not exaggeration, not misunderstanding. Fantasy. She was not just saying I had made the amount bigger. She was saying I had invented the pattern. I think that was the moment something in me stopped trying to be understood and started wanting the truth to be undeniable. I wrote back one word. "Okay." The next morning, I called my bank during my break and asked what I needed to get a printed transfer history by date range and recipient. The woman on the phone was polite and bored, which was strangely comforting. She told me I could come into a branch with my ID and request printed statements or transaction history. To her, it was just banking. To me, it felt like asking where to find the body of a crime nobody else believed happened. I made an appointment for the next afternoon. Then I texted my mother, "I'm going to the bank tomorrow at 2. You said you wanted to see it printed. You can come." I thought that would make her back off. I really did. I thought maybe the word bank would make the whole thing feel less like a family argument and more like what it was, a paper trail. But my mother had spent too many years assuming I would fold before anything became uncomfortable. She replied, "Fine, I'll come. Maybe then you'll stop telling people you carried this family." That sentence made my hands go still over the phone, because I had not told people that. I had protected her. I had protected my brother. I had swallowed details until they became a lump in my throat. And somehow, even that protection had become another accusation. My brother texted later that day, probably after my mother told him about the bank. "Why are you doing all this?" I almost answered with a paragraph. I almost explained that I was not trying to ruin him, that I was tired of being called selfish, that he could have stopped this at dinner with one honest sentence. Instead, I wrote, "Because you let her say I never helped." He did not respond. That silence was different from the silence at dinner. At dinner, his silence protected him. This time, it told me he knew exactly what the bank would show. By the time I went to bed, the spreadsheet was still incomplete, but it was enough. I had dates, amounts, recipients, text messages, and notes. I had proof of money I sent while telling myself, family did not require receipts. I had proof of emergencies that somehow became invisible once they were paid. And the next day, my mother was going to sit beside me in a bank office, while a stranger printed the version of our family history she had spent years editing. The next morning, my mother did not ask if I had slept. She did not ask